In Chapter 1, Varatus and Alcyon escape Bricon swimming down a river to evade capture. They briefly rest, where Alcyon thanks Varatus for freeing his family and destroying Calidus' effigy. Varatus reflects on his past, realizing how he's been deceived by Nathair. As they move through the forest, they are hunted by Kadoshim, demon-possessed warriors. In a violent battle, Alcyon and Varatus fight the Kadoshim, with Alcyon using his strength to kill one. Varatus is injured, but just as they face defeat, Kralis and Maquin appear, joining the fight and helping defeat the Kadoshim. In Chapter 2, Nathair reflects on the giant Skald's skeleton and his own quest to unite the fractured world. After a costly victory in Drasil, he learns that Varatus betrayed him. He is summoned by Calidus and finds the fortress still not secure, with scattered Jahar forces. In a brutal confrontation, Nathair fights a Jahar warrior, but is saved by a Kadoshim. Calidus interrogates the Jahar prisoners, learning Corban's influence remains strong. Nathair feels conflicted as he prepares for the next stage in the war, struggling with his choices and the toll of the violence. In Chapter 3, Corellin struggles with grief and fear as she reflects on the previous day's battle. She is haunted by the disappearance of Corban and searches for him, clinging to hope. Gar joins her, and they meet Pax, who tells them Corban and his father fought giants but were separated. They follow Pax's directions to a glade where they find the bodies of 3 slain giants and Attilius. Corellin discovers a sword belonging to Ban, raising her fear. She then follows a blood trail to a river, where she finds Storm badly wounded but still alive. In Chapter 4, Corban finds himself in the Otherworld, plagued by painful memories and confusion. He recalls a serene valley and a red-leaved maple, then encounters a creature named Viathun, who reveals himself as neither Ben Elam nor Kadoshim. Viathun captures Corban, but he is rescued by the Ben Elam. He is brought to a fortress where he confronts Maikal, his former comrade. Maikal reveals that Drasil has fallen and many have died, but there is still hope as long as Corban lives. Corban, consumed by rage and grief, vows to return to fight for his loved ones, rejecting Maikal's help. In Chapter 5, Rafe wakes in the marshlands, feeling stronger and more alive after drinking from a mysterious enchanted cup. He reflects on his escape from the battle, his survival, and his newfound vitality. As he makes his way back, he notices changes around Morkant's tower, where he is confronted by Morkant, now the Lord of Ardan. Rafe is summoned to meet Queen Reen, who questions his disappearance and his odd behavior. During their interaction, Rafe's anger erupts, surprising everyone, but Ryn forgives him, reminding him of his place. She orders him to help with a strategic map, planning to defeat Adana. In Chapter 6, Camlin returns to Dunkrin after a hunting trip, having helped track down stragglers from Evnus and Morkant's warband. He's accompanied by Meg, a young warrior who has proven herself capable. The two join the rest of the warriors as they prepare to leave Dunkrin, with Adana revealing plans to move the warband into Arden. She stresses the need to take the fight to Ryn, despite the risks. Meanwhile, Vaughn approaches Adana with important information about the 7 treasures, suggesting he knows the location of one. Camlin and the others continue strategizing their next moves. In Chapter 7, Corellin watches Brina tend to the critically injured Storm, using Giant's blood to save her. Brina warns Corellin to keep it a secret, but hopes for Storm's survival remain slim. As Gar organizes a search for Corban, Corellin finds a dead bear and tracks leading north, suspecting the Jotun giants took Corban. After meeting Tahir and his warriors, Gar decides to go after Corban, while Tahir's group rests. Corellin, Doth, Kula, and Laith pursue the giants, discovering an ancient road they are traveling fast along. Corellin decides to leave at dawn to rescue Corban, with Gar joining them despite initial reluctance. In Chapter 8, Corban wakes to pain, realizing he's still in Forn, being dragged through the forest on a makeshift litter by 2 giants. He recalls his meeting with Maikal and his desire to find his friends, despite his battered state. The giants, including Ilder, warlord of the Jotun, tend to his injuries. Ilder questions Corban's identity, impressed by his armoring and the loyalty he inspired in others. Corban reveals his name, Corban ben Thanen, and demands to know where they are taking him. Ilder responds that they are heading to Graham's Hold, away from Drasil and the forest. In Chapter 9, Fidel reflects on her son Nathair's betrayal, his alliance with the Kadoshim, and her conflicting emotions. Alban, a healer and warrior, urges her to leave their camp for strategic reasons, but Fidel is determined to stay until Makin, Kralis, and Varatus return. When they do, The group discusses their next move. Albin suggests heading to Drasil to oppose the Kadoshim, while Kralis proposes returning home to regroup. Alcyon, motivated by a blood debt, decides to join them. Tensions rise as the group debates whether to retreat